Just to start, I want to welcome everybody to today's Towards Work CV Skills session. It's the second of our three CV skills sessions, which we're running this month. Our first last week around personal statements and strengths went really well. So I'm delighted today then to welcome Mark Hoare from CPL Ireland, who's going to talk to us about CVs and cover letters. I'll just introduce myself first. I'm Patrick from Towards Work at Open Doors. I am a white male with short brown hair. Today I'm wearing a white shirt and black jacket, and I have a green and greeny blue background on my screen. I'll shortly hand over to Mark, but just before we begin, just to say, as just mentioned, the session is being recorded today. This is a webinar, so we don't have anybody's video or sound on the screen, just myself, Mark, and my colleague Christabel is here supporting as well. If in terms of questions throughout the session, there is a Q&A function on the bottom of the screen. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into that. But they will either be answered during the session or at the end, we'll have a time for Q&A where the questions in the chat will be answered, or you'll also have a chance to raise your hand and to speak directly to myself or Mark to ask any questions that you may have. I think that's probably enough for me. Mark, I'll hand over to you to begin. So thanks a million for joining us, and we hope everyone you really enjoy it. So thanks a million.
Brilliant. Thank you, Patrick. Nice to meet everyone today. My name is Mark. I'm a white male. I have brown hair. Today I'm wearing a cream polo shirt, and I have a virtual background of the CPL office here with a big bright blue light. So no, I'm not on site. I'm working from home. I'm based down in County Wexford. So that's a virtual background. And without further ado, let's get started. So a little bit about myself, first of all, before we jump straight in. So warm welcome to all of you to today's CV writing workshop. I'm absolutely thrilled to be invited by Patrick and have the opportunity to be your host for what will hopefully be a very informative and engaging session. So my name is Mark. I'm here to guide you through the delights of creating an impressive CV that will enhance your chances of success, and hopefully we can give you something so you can stand out in what is a very competitive job market today in 2023. So whether that be for finding your first role or for changing jobs, I hope I'll be able to add some value on the topic. So before we dive straight into the ins and outs of CV writing, I suppose, let me tell you a little bit about myself. So currently I work in recruitment in the technology sector. And I specifically specialize in contract and temporary positions. So I work on a team with 25 colleagues who all work and specialize in various different areas within the technology space. So this could mean one of my colleagues only works on project managers, my other colleague may only work recruiting for data analysts, and so on and so forth. So this allows everybody to really be a specialist in each area so we can help companies and candidates alike. So my personal journey began with my education. I studied in DIT, which is now TUD. I graduated with a 2-1 in international business and Spanish. And I suppose that led me to a 3rd year in college, which was mandatory to go to Spain. So I went to Spain and I studied business in Spain. And so this really gave me, I suppose, a good understanding of what it was like to live in another country and I suppose the people there. And after graduating, I had to go back. So I returned after I graduated. And now, most recently, I got into recruitment with almost coming up on 3 years of experience. So I started in hospitality and industrial, and now I work in technology, as I mentioned. So it's been really interesting to see how the different industries work and from a recruitment perspective. So this I suppose, has given me some various insights onto what different industries could be looking for on a CV. and hopefully I can help you from an insider's point of view, show you what I would like to see on a CV. So, but before that, life's not all about work. I do have some hobbies and interests. In my spare time, I love to watch live sports. There's something really exciting about energy of watching something live and watching an event unfold before your eyes. Also, I love to be in nature, walking the dog or swimming on the beach in County Wexford, only if the temperature is right. So now you know a little bit about myself. Let's shift our focus to what we came here to do. So the goal of this today will to give you the knowledge to create a CV that will stand out. It can really be a daunting thing. Where do I begin? So I suppose I'm here to give you a little bit of a roadmap to simplify that, and I suppose unlock some secrets, I suppose. So remember, your CV is the first opportunity you have to make a positive impression on the person who is reading that. So that could be employers, that could be recruiters. So essentially, it's serving as your personal marketing tool, and it could potentially open doors to new opportunities. So let's kick this off, unravel some secrets, and once again, you're all very, very welcome. As Patrick mentioned, there will be a time for Q&A at the end, but if you have any burning questions as I'm speaking, don't be shy, and you can pop them in the chat box. So now, I suppose here's the agenda or our contents of what we will cover today. These are what I feel are really the main topics of what we need to cover when we're covering CV writing. So I have taken an approach today, as I mentioned, around CVs from a recruiter's point of view. So I can start by telling you a little bit about what we do, first and foremost here at CPL, and ultimately understanding the role of a recruiter and what is it that we do. Are we job genies? Are we job fairs? We'll find out. We'll follow that by jumping into, I suppose, the main topic of today, writing your CV, and the CV tips and how to apply them to your CV. I have included a nice slide where there's 6 action words. We're all beginning with or, so hopefully you can use some or all of them action words to take away from today's webinar, and you can apply these words and make impactful changes. So we'll, excuse me. So I covered off also a little section about the ever-changing landscape that we're living today and technology, and how technology is affecting our CV, how technology affects where it's going, and how our CV is viewed. Also, more importantly, if we're going to learn about how to write a good CV, we're now going to have to be able to talk about how to talk through your CV, which will be naturally the next point of, if your CV is successfully qualified for a position, you're going to now have to be able to talk through your experience. So I'm going to give some tips on that. And I suppose, most importantly, where does my CV go? So we can spend lots of time writing the CV and really polishing it and making it perfect. But at the end of the day, we need somewhere for that CV to go for it to be really useful. So that's what we'll be covering today. So we'll jump in and I'll tell you, I'll try not to repeat myself. I'm sure a lot of people are very familiar with what a recruitment agency does, but I suppose from someone in an agency, this is what my view. So in specific, CPL would be one of the largest agencies in Europe, and we connect talented individuals with top companies across a lot of different industries. So at CPL, what we aim to do is match the right people with the right jobs. So that will create a successful and exciting career path for individuals, while at the same time meeting the needs and allowing a company to grow. So we're allowing the growth of professionals and the clients. So with over 30 years of experience in recruitment, CPL have established a strong reputation here in Ireland and globally for our expertise, professionalism, and our commitment to results. So for job seekers, as I mentioned, we can offer personalized guidance and support through the process. So that could be anything from CV writing to a general consultation or conversation on how the market is looking, or interview preparation. And we can offer some tools and resources so that you can stand out, like what we're doing here today. So We have a huge network of client companies, and they could range from all different sectors like IT, healthcare, finance, marketing. So a recruiter essentially will be specialized in a vertical. A vertical just means an industry. So not every recruiter has every job you need. So I suppose that leads me on to my next slide, is what we cover in CPL. So I won't go through each and every one of these, but these are some of the key areas that we do cover in CPL. Now, again, I'm not going to discuss each one of these, but the key takeaway point here that I want you to remember is that you must, if you're going to talk and use with a recruiter to help you on your job search, you must connect with the right recruiter. So for example, I'm in technology, and if you were looking for a job in construction, I wouldn't have the right details to be able to help you comprehensively and properly. So as I'm saying, the key takeaway here is if you're going to use recruitment agencies, and more specifically recruiters, make sure they're specialized in the area that of your desire. So if you want to get into finance, ensure you're talking to a finance recruiter. So this may seem really obvious, but I suppose not everybody knows that. And I was surprised, even a lot of my friends, they wouldn't have known that. You thought recruiter was quite a general thing. No, there's specific recruiters for different industries. So, and often, like myself, I might have 5 or 6 jobs within my space. So essentially, the more recruiters you're talking to, the more access to jobs or actual live jobs that they have on at the moment. So time is valuable, so make sure you're spending your time on the right things. Connect with multiple industry-specific recruiters, and this will ensure you're really covering the space well. So also, something someone may not know is a recruiter in different agencies may have different jobs. So there, again, by covering all angles, you may be, you're not leaving any stone uncovered and making sure you're really covering the market. So that's a little bit about what we do here at CPL, and I suppose what a recruiter can offer you. Now, understanding recruitment and the role of a recruiter. So what does a recruiter do? Look, don't get me wrong, there is absolutely lots of different positions within recruitment. I'm going to talk about a traditional recruitment consultant. Let's keep it simple. So recruitment consultant would act as the middleman between the job seeker and the hiring manager, or for what I will refer to as the client or the company. So typically, my day would look like a client or a company would reach out to me and they would request me to submit candidates who would fulfill certain criteria regarding experience and qualifications or education. So usually the company will be very strict in terms of what individuals they want to see. So a lot of the time, a company or a client will only want to see a profile that is a very, very close match to the required skills or qualification, even as far as visa type and experience. So in recruitment, a recruitment agency is only paid by the client when they decide to hire the profile I send. So while there is no harm in contacting a recruiter, if you see a job that you may be a fit for, but there's an element of speculation, I would also encourage you to apply direct with something like this. So the reason why is because a company or client, they will pay a fee, a finder's fee essentially, for when we find a candidate. Now, understandably, the client or company will only want to pay a fee for really, really strong matches or candidates that match the criteria. So they'll be less keen to pay a fee for a candidate who meets 50% of the skills but looks really good and potential to grow into that position. For roles like this, you're better off to go direct, hire directly on the website, apply on the website, or talk to recruiters who work direct for that company. So the reason is they won't have to pay a fee, and maybe if you're fitting some of the skills, it will be a much easier decision for them to make when there's not a fee involved. So although this wouldn't make my job any easier, for someone, and I'm, I suppose, giving tips on how to best leverage all of the options they have, I would use a recruiter when you're a really, really close skills match to a job, and apply direct if you are, you know, a kind of skills match. So maybe you have 50%, you maybe have the experience, but not the education, or vice versa. I would always apply direct in these situations, because you're more likely to be reached out to in that sense. So do's and don'ts working with a recruiter, very briefly. What, I suppose, do you do when working with a recruiter? So beyond the obvious, I suppose, feel free to put it in the Q&A if you have any suggestions what you think you should do or you think you shouldn't do when working with a recruiter. Again, I'm keeping it quite, I suppose, simple, and it's really part of my everyday. But once you go outside recruitment, you don't realize, I suppose, like some of my friends and family, some don't know these tips. So one of the first do's, clearly communicate your goals, your expectations. So be very, very open with your recruiter about your goals, your industry, your desired role, and your long-term career objectives. So this will help us align your profile with the suitable opportunities that we may have. So that's one do, be clear. 2, provide a well-crafted CV. So hopefully this is something I'm going to be able to help you to do. If you want to work with a recruiter, you want to make sure your CV is up to date. It's tailored to the position that you might be looking for, and highlights your relevant skills and experience. So a clear CV makes it much easier for a recruiter to digest and process the information, and present you also to potential employers. So be clear, a well-presented CV, they're the 2 do's. So maintain regular communication. To a degree, absolutely. You don't essentially may not be updates for you to discuss every day or every week with your recruiter, but do maintain regular communication. So stay in touch with your recruiter, and always promptly respond to the requests if they're asking for some additional information or some updates. So regular communication will show you're engaged, I suppose, and shows your commitment and interest. And I know, maybe if I have a suitable opportunity, they're always contacting me, I'll pick up the phone first. So it can be that simple sometimes. It's more being engaged, and you'll be at the top of somebody's mind, on the top of somebody's list, as somebody who always is interested and is always available. That is absolutely a huge element, I suppose, and it's often overlooked. And number 4 of do's, again, it's coming away from CVs, but prepare for interviews. So a recruiter, if you get an interview via a recruiter, they will always have some tips for you. They'll have had a candidate who has previously interviewed there, or they may have received tips directly. So let the recruiter ask those hard questions for you. What can I expect in the interview? They can ask the questions maybe you're not comfortable doing. So take the time. I suppose apart from the questions maybe a recruiter can help you with, do your own preparation, of course. So take the time to research the companies, review the job spec, you'd be surprised, and practice common interview questions. So the STAR method is a very, very common answering method that people like to see you respond to questions. I'll cover this a little bit later, but I suppose that would be one to keep in mind, would be the STAR method when answering questions. So providing feedback or asking for feedback on your CV. Now, of course, after each interview, this will be a common thing to do, would be ask for feedback on how your interview went. Don't do this on the same day you interview. Leave it 2 or 3 days. It's a very, very common time period is for someone to make a decision. They may have other candidates in the process, and a lot of the times these things may take some time to get past the processes. Maybe there's some budgets that need signing, things that are out of everybody's control. So maybe you are the hire and you are the preferred candidate. It's just the company's hands are tied on the decision-making period. So often there can be a lot of complex factors at play around interviews and hiring, I suppose. So hopefully I've explained a little bit about that and what you should do with using a recruiter. Now, importantly, don't do when speaking or using a recruiter to help on your job search. So don't be unresponsive. So that avoid any delays within reason. Of course, responding to an emails or calls. Look, if you can't take calls, that's absolutely normal. These things happen. If you miss a call, you miss an email, but you're doing something on a given day. That's okay. These things happen, but at your first given opportunity, when it's convenient for yourself, is to go back. And again, it's going back on, so you look engaged and you're easy to communicate with. This is a big point, I suppose. So don't be unresponsive. And within reason, answer, I suppose, as promptly as you can. And regular communication is really, I suppose, crucial to maintaining that relationship with your recruiter. So a second one would don't rely solely on the recruiter. So while we are valuable resources, and I can give you lots of information about the jobs that are out there now, hiring trends for last year, for this year, then I'm not responsible, or a recruiter is not responsible for your entire job search. So we are just one element of a job search. So if you want to, I suppose, diversify your search, is again, as I spoke about previously, go direct. You can use multiple agencies, and also applying via friends and family or networks. You'd be surprised of people when you just ask around and you start the conversation. Somebody asks you, how's work or how's college? It's great. How's your work? You need to network. Think like a recruiter. Go back to them. Maybe your friends and family in an inner circle. If there's somebody, there's opportunities much closer than you think, can often be the case. So don't solely depend on one recruiter. So this point comes from my last point again. So often maybe I could specialize in 4 or 5 certain companies, whereas another agency may specialize with another 4 or 5 different companies. So if you're solely depending on one recruiter, you're solely dependent on the opportunities that he has. So if you're working with multiple recruiters, you have multiple sets of eyes looking on the market. So again, you have multiple people checking up on opportunities that are relevant for you. So yes, I suppose sticking to those do's and don'ts. When working with a recruiter, you should be able to have a good relationship with a recruiter, and that will likely enhance your chances of finding the ideal opportunity for yourself and hopefully, ultimately, landing that job. So yeah, let me get stuck into, I suppose, what we are all here today. So a CV and a cover letter. So now we understand what a recruitment agency actually does, and furthermore, what I do or what a recruiter does. So let's get into the main body of the workshop, which is writing and building a CV cover letter. Unless, Patrick, there's any interesting questions in there at the moment that I suppose we could answer, or no? Will I continue on?
Mark, just one of the comments there was just from one of our attendees. I think something a person should do is to present yourself properly to the person they're hoping to be recruited by. So that's a very good. Sorry, apologies, okay. My camera was off. But that's a great, that's a really good comment.
Absolutely.
To say. The question from TJ, which I'm sure you'll probably get to in a moment, but it's just asking, is it better to write a CV or to type it up on a computer?
That's a good question. That's a very good question, because I suppose our ever-changing landscape. I would say, I'm going to answer that one right now, and I would say type the CV. And for the way our world is going, I see hundreds of CVs a day, and I haven't seen one written yet in 3 years of recruitment. So I suppose my answer is not potentially the right answer, but for my view, I've never seen a written CV. Maybe I'm too young for that, and I need to cast the question back to some of my older colleagues. Maybe they've seen some written CVs, but for me, I would definitely be typing the CV, I suppose.
And maybe I suspect perhaps TJ might be asking there as well. Don't know, TJ, sorry, I'm gonna apologies if I'm putting the wrong words in your mouth, but perhaps as well, I know sometimes people might look to type a CV. Some job applications may ask you to type the CV information into a form online, or perhaps some people might want to put it into the body of an email. that they're sending instead. Maybe instead of sending it as a separate document. Perhaps as well, the option of sending in, maybe it might be typed out, but it could be a paper CV sent into a company as well, rather than an email. These might be some of the variations that TJ might be wondering about as well.
Yes, and points I'll touch on next in the CV and technology slide, I suppose, is was also one of my questions, I suppose, is the last CV anyone has handed out, what's their method that they've done it? So I suppose now I've asked it, so I'll continue on, but if someone wants to type their answer in the box, the last CV you sent out, did you hand deliver it? Did you send it in the post? Did you email it? Did you drop it in to your local shop or the local employer? Pop your answers in the chat there. I'd be interested to see.
What I can do actually, Mark, I can create a little poll there.
Oh, brilliant.
And I can put that to everybody to answer. So I'll get going on that while you're
the answers then should flow nicely in when I hit the CV and technology, and we can discuss it some more. So brilliant. Thanks, Patrick. Okay. So why is a CV so important? So, extra points, if anyone knows the origin or the first writer of the CV. And again, you can drop it in. Oh, Patrick, I'm putting you hard at work here, Patrick. Now, I've given you a poll. Can you open a box or something like that?
We have the questions and answers section. So if anyone wants to post an answer to you there, they can do it in the Q&A.
So extra points if anyone knows who the first man to write a CV was on record in history. So I suppose, first of all, resume can be a common word seen for a CV. Resume means to summarize in French. So I suppose that's where that word comes from. So your resume will be summarizing essentially your skills and experience. Let me have a look. So, okay, I'll give you the answer now. So the first, let me see. So Leonardo da Vinci was credited with creating the first CV in the year 1482. That was when he wrote a letter to the Duke of Milan. And essentially what he wanted to do, he wanted to be I believe it was the director of events. So Leonardo, he made sure that his letter, so this was not a CV in the traditional sense, this was actually just a letter, but it's the first letter in history that is documented, that it summarizes skills and experience. So essentially, Da Vinci made sure his letter focused on his strengths that he had, and they were most closely aligned with the Duke's needs. So it wasn't, I suppose, in a traditional sense of bullet points and headings. This was a letter to the Duke to say how he had the skills required for a vacancy the Duke had. So although Leonardo da Vinci, a lot of people will know as a very, very famous artist, he left out all of his skills in these letters of artistic skills. And again, instead, he focused his letter on his aptitude to build things. So he left his famous paintings behind, and he said, like, I'm good at building things. So for this reason, I would be perfect for the position for building chariots. So a very famous artist wrote his CV towards building chariots because he focused on how he was creative and how he was good at designing things. So this was the first CV on record, and not a CV in traditional sense, but I suppose an outline of what he could do and how he could impact for the Duke. So Da Vinci, a lot of people will know, one of Da Vinci's most famous paintings was the Madonna or the Annunciation. Again, he left these things out of his summary because they were not relevant to the role he was applying for. So some of the most famous artistic pieces to date were left out of his history because he wanted to be relevant to the role. So this, I suppose, the key takeaway from this is you want to be relevant to the role. You want to be putting in the details that are relevant to the role that you're applying for. So I suppose if you had, everyone got a small certificate in primary school, and it's not entirely relevant to a job of a software engineer. I wouldn't include it. You need to be specific in what you're including, I suppose, so it's relevant towards the role. It needs to highlight your best experience, skills, achievements, and what you can bring to the business. So I suppose, and finally, on the intros on here, a curriculum vitae is Latin for the course of your life, or the course of one's life. So again, it's representing a journey in education, skills, highlights, projects, everything you've done to date, to, I suppose, in one place that will formalize your profile and how you're different to each other. So essentially, why is a CV so important? It is your sales pitch. Your sales pitch is, I suppose, imagine yourself, when you go into the shop, imagine yourself picking a product. All of the products very, very similar, but they all have different branding. They may have different descriptions or different imagery, or I suppose slogans, be what it is that make up a brand. You are your own brand within the jobs market. So you need to set yourself aside. If all the product, you need to think yourself products on the shelf. You need to set yourself apart, I suppose, with all of the other products or candidates that are vying for attention. So just like these products, everyone has their own unique abilities, and everyone has their own unique profile, different experience that makes up who they are. So I suppose your CV is the packaging that will showcase these qualities and hopefully entice the receiver or the reader of that CV to choose yourself and definitely enter you in that process. So I suppose your sales pitch or your CV should document an intro to your skills, so a quick introduction to your skills and experience, how you can meet the need and what is the reason you can meet the need, and your distinctive qualities. So maybe your achievements or your USP, your unique selling point. So maybe you have an education in medicine, but you have a year experience in sales. So your USP here would be you're a experienced salesperson with a background in medicine. So you would be looking at maybe sales crossed with healthcare roles. So that would be your USP. So maybe you are another good example of someone's USP. So maybe someone is a truck driver, but they speak 3 languages. So they're actually multilingual truck driver in the sense of their skills they have from different elements, they can combine them and makes them unique. So a combination of what you've done so far from your experience and education makes up what is your USP. So only you will know the answer to that. What is your USP? Your own experience and qualifications will define that. So LinkedIn is your digital CV. What does this mean? As the way I see them, I suppose CVs going, I would say I couldn't put a time on it. It won't be soon, but the CV in its traditional sense of a document will disappear, and very, very similarly to social media websites, LinkedIn will be your digital CV. So I can't stress enough the importance of LinkedIn on your job search. You need to put as much information on your LinkedIn as is on your CV, because a lot of people, this will be the way they find your CV. You don't have to send it, they'll find you because of the skills that you've put up on that account. So you need to be very, very, I suppose, specific on the wording you use, just as is on a CV. I think LinkedIn has 1 billion users. There's almost 6 billion in the population. So that will show, I suppose, we're not even covering all of the profiles. I would say that will catch up very soon. And again, I can't put a time on it, but I would say LinkedIn could replace the traditional CV. So again, I'll cover a little bit about this and I suppose the aspects of what you need to consider on technology and LinkedIn in regards to your CV in a later slide. But let's, I suppose, what probably we were waiting for is, how would I format a CV? I suppose this would be the best way to format a CV in my idea. So you need to get the basics right. These are the very, very basics. Your name needs to be the largest text on the document. So when you start with your name, put it front and center, right in the middle, in bigger text than any other heading. This needs to be bigger than a heading that says education. This needs to be bigger than a heading that says work experience or anything else. Why? Because if you want someone to remember one thing from your CV, it's your name. So for me, it needs to be front and center, the biggest wording on. Now, it doesn't need to be absolutely oversized and it doesn't need to take a whole page, but within reason, it needs to be the largest text on your profile. Another thing would be use clear font. Use a clear font. So, for example, Times New Roman or Arial are really very clear fonts to use. Now, the reason for this is, I suppose, a recruiter traditionally won't spend a lot of time going through CVs. They will skim read them. I hear people saying the average is 10 seconds for reading a CV for a recruiter. Now, I don't read them that fast. Now, I do spend a little bit longer than that, but I can imagine there are certain industries where they're very, very busy and they don't have more than 10 seconds to view. So you want that 10 seconds of a flash of viewing to be, I suppose, you want to grab the attention of the reader. You want to be able, for that reader to be able to process the information very quickly and easily. So for that reason, use clear font. I would say don't be afraid of leaving some blank space between different sections on your CV. Again, back to the first point I've made, if I'm flashing over your CV, I want to be able to digest the information without reading paragraphs and paragraphs. Often it won't get read. So the more digestible and the more easier to process the information. So that would be leave blank spaces, bullet points, don't be afraid of bullet points, and use break lines, I suppose, to separate sections. They can all be very, very useful visual tools that can help, I suppose, help your CV stand out. So your name, your contact details, your working rights can be very, very helpful. Essentially, what you want to do is test your contact details. Now, I can't stress that enough. Test your contact details. So you put your mobile number and you put your email address on the CV. Test them. Now, this seems very, very simple, but you wouldn't believe the amount of CVs that I receive when I try to call it. There's one number that's incorrect, or maybe the area code is incorrect, and I can't, the line doesn't ring. Now, I can't guess the final number. That would be very impressive. Similarly, an email address, one wrong letter, one wrong number, a full stop in the wrong position, and the email will bounce, and I won't be able to contact you. So maybe I have a position that you'd be perfect for, but down to proofreading your contact details can be very, very important. So again, test the contact details. So I would go with formatting. I would go name. I would go a small personal statement. So that could be 4 lines of hardworking professional seeking an opening in the finance industry. Graduated in year with a, you don't even need to detail if you did or not, or currently studying or currently seeking a role in. It doesn't necessarily have to build up what you have done. It could just give a small description of what describes you now today. So for myself, Mark, results-driven professional that is currently, I'm not, but seeking a new role in the technology industry in recruitment. So that could be as simple as the personal statement. It will give it just a little bit of warming for someone reading your CV, saying, what are his motivations? Where is he looking to go? Location, city, I would always put under your name. This will be, again, is kind of warming. If the position that you're looking for is in Dublin and the candidate is in Cork. It can be often very, very confusing for a recruiter to view a CV from Cork. And my very simple, my simple, I suppose, when I view the CV, simply I would think, but this candidate is in Cork. So maybe they have family in Dublin, and that's why they're applying for the role. Put it in brackets. There's never, you can't give enough. I suppose you can't overgive that information. So it would say, no problem relocating, family in Dublin, or lived in Dublin for 4 years during college, large network. So simple things like this can be the difference between, I suppose, getting that call and getting that opportunity to go to interview. So visa status may not be relevant to everybody. So EU is EU. We're good to work everywhere. It's everywhere in Europe, that is, sorry. Some employers, so there's a stamp 1G. So that's when you graduate, you'll be on a stamp 1G. And this is, I suppose, you have a certain period of time to work here in Ireland before you must secure sponsorship. So a lot of roles can offer sponsorship, and a lot of roles don't offer sponsorship. For example, a temporary or a contract role will not offer sponsorship. A permanent role generally can. So I suppose it's nice to detail this, if your visa status, because it can be, again, a defining point of if you're available to work that role. Availability, do you have a 2-week notice period? 30-day notice period? What is that? I suppose, again, detail is good on this. So if you're a 3-month notice period, so believe it or not, people have 3-month notice periods. And often, maybe if the position is, needed ASAP, a 3-month notice period will be too long for an employer to wait. So if you are immediately available, this can often be a big advantage. So right, immediately available, or 1-week notice, to whatever it is. Again, you could include this information and it could be beneficial. So project work. These can be great. I love when someone gives good, I suppose, a good description of the project work that they have done. Why? Because maybe the candidate doesn't have experience in that sector yet. So they don't have any post-education experience. But what I've seen they've done in their projects in college, I know they have extensive knowledge on the topic. So often project work, maybe you don't have work experience in the sector, but you have achieved on projects, worked on projects, or contributed to projects. This can show, I suppose, your skills and why you're applicable to a role where maybe you don't have experience. Maybe you have experience in a different sector, but you want to show, I suppose, you have the knowledge, the know-how, the skills to do this job. These project work can be an excellent way of showing your transferable skills. So, and so I've given you, I suppose, a little bit on takeaway here, so you didn't have to listen on everything I did say. I know, I suppose it's a lot to take in, but again, needs to be not looking like this. If your CV, this is too hard to digest. I put this here as the information I've spoken about on my last slide, but if the information is this packed in, it can be very, very difficult to digest it quickly without really having to, I suppose, focus on what you're reading. So I would say, again, use blank spaces, bullet points, and don't be afraid of line breaks, and don't be afraid of a little blank space on your CV to make it, I suppose, very, very readable. So achievements or projects. Oh, excuse me now. Achievements or projects, I like to use the STAR method. So in a project or an achievement, what did you do? What was the situation? What was the task? What was the action? What was the result? Did you build a team? Did you improve a process? Did you, I suppose, I have a good example here, e.g., successfully built an application in college that tracked the traffic flow in Dublin during rush hour. So maybe you have no work experience, but you worked on a project like this. A technology, someone who's looking for someone that builds traffic apps is going to say, oh, perfect, they've done a great project on building apps here. So although they may not have experience because they've included it in a project, They can see, oh, they have the skills, they have, I suppose, achieved and worked on this sector. So avoid using jargon. So maybe there's some words or acronyms or abbreviations that people outside of your company or industry don't understand. So state the obvious if somebody externally would not understand. For example, in recruitment, when we talk about permanent recruitment, we might say perm. Now, if I use perm in a sentence outside, I suppose, my industry space, somebody might think I'm talking about a haircut. So no, you need to be very, I suppose, state the obvious if someone doesn't understand what it is. And also another important point would be your hobbies and interests. They could spark it. That could be a very, very easy path into a conversation. So maybe it's a book or a series of books that you love, and the recruiter or person reading your CV just happens to love that book too. They're going to want to talk to you, and the book will come up in conversation. So people are people at the end of the day. We talk so much about work. We're so caught up in skills, qualifications, applications, all of these things. So is the recruiter, believe it or not, or so is the person reading your CV. So, you know, if there's an easier element of having a conversation about a book you like because you included it, again, include that on your CV. You never know what conversation it could start. It could be down jazz music, a series of books. It could be you love to going out finding a new restaurant to eat. That's absolutely an interest to include. Don't leave that off. I would say that tells a lot about a person. Oh, they're curious. Oh, they like to try new things. So I would say something as simple as love to find new restaurants. That is absolutely what I would like to see in a hobbies and interests section. So yeah, let's moving on, I suppose, to some action words, some verbs that I could say when we leave here today. You can revise your CV. Not one of the action words. You can revise one of your CV and see where you can apply any of these words, and can you do anything that can change it impactfully. So 6 R's. Review. So this would be very, very important for obvious reasons. So look for typos, look for spelling mistakes, look for if you're formatting it bad, maybe something slipped and it doesn't make sense and half a word is on this side. And so what I would do is review your CV. So you need to review for proofreading. You need to, as I previously said, review for contact details, test the contact details, that importantly, and review the details that are on, I suppose, your CV, and be able to talk to them. Be able to talk through your, if you get a call and someone asks you about some information on your CV, you absolutely are going to want to know it and be able to talk comprehensively about it. If you can't, shouldn't be on the CV. If it's a speculative, I suppose, skill, remove any details that are not relevant. So maybe it's a part-time casual job 10 years ago that is absolutely no relevancy to this role. So again, it may be you're looking for a job in software engineering and this is a job as a chef. They're not relevant. You can definitely include it, but to show your aptitude, you want to put it under not relevant to the role, or other experience not relevant to the role. So I suppose you're still including it, but you're not, I suppose, trying to push it as transferable skill from chef to software engineer. If I see someone that has without forming that gap for me, it's often, I would view a CV, say someone's trying to be a software engineer and they have 10 years of chef experience. Now, without a cover letter or any more information on that to me, it would be difficult for me to comprehend why this person is applying and how relevant they are. So again, you need to include that information or remove it if it's not relevant. So reorder your information chronologically always. It's always going to be in chronological order. So but for both education and experience, chronological order. Very simple. Renovate or refurbish or renovate. So if your CV looks like this page and it's full of text and very hard to read, you need to renovate your CV. So add some spaces, some line breaks, maybe some action words, maybe if your performance is judged on, how many calls you answer, how many CVs you send, put those numbers in. So I suppose put those metrics or those ratings in, and people can make their own judgment on that. So relate. So relating your skills and experience to the job you're applying for. So maybe there's a job in HR that you want to go into human resources. Maybe you don't have any experience working in human resources, but you worked on a volunteer project who was involved in hiring 10 people over the course of a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. That's relevant to that role. So although you haven't been working, you're doing volunteer work, who's involved in hiring. So again, think outside the box here. You need to, I suppose, it doesn't always need to be in a traditional sense, a job that you have contributed towards this experience or skills. Again, it's project work. So relate is going back to the project work. And finally, rebranding. So going back to what we spoke about, how do you stand out off the shelf? How do your packaging needs to be your brand? So dive into your skill set. Maybe your skills are more transferable than you think. So there's titles out there that all require similar skill sets, but they may not be the same title. So don't limit yourself to just the words you've described yourself with, because essentially that's what a CV is, the words you have described yourself with. And for that reason, I would say do not use a template. Don't use a CV template. You want to write your own CV. It's your brand. You want to rebrand it to yourself. Again, coming back on the USP, the unique selling point. You're putting your USP on your CV, as your CV is your brand. So again, don't use a template, write it yourself, because you know yourself better than anybody does. So hopefully that can give you some takeaway points here on when we leave here today. You can use these 6, and I suppose will be a very helpful way of optimizing your CV. So CV and technology. Now, I said I would come loop back around on this. Did we have a couple of Q's and A's, or maybe not? I can check here with Patrick. Did anybody, how was the last way they sent their CV to an employer?
I didn't launch that poll, Mark, because I didn't want to be interrupting you during your
No
piece,
worries
but
at all.
I can put that poll out now. We can give you a minute just to answer.
I'd be very interested to see, I suppose, if, the answers.
So we've just launched that poll there now, if everybody wants to answer.
We're having, the answers are pouring in here, Patrick.
Great stuff.
Yeah, I suppose, see where you talked your brand. Yes. And then we just need to start. Sorry about that. Thanks very much.
Okay, okay. Put a couple in. Nearly there.
9 with 12.
That's a good turnout.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
That's great. And perhaps, look, maybe perhaps some people on the call today haven't submitted a recent CV. So if you haven't, don't feel obliged to answer there.
You're not obliged to answer. No, correct.
Some of you might be just at the start of your work journeys as well. So it's yeah, don't feel pressure to answer if you don't have something to add in. That's no problem at all.
Did you have a timer on that, Patrick, or does it end naturally?
So yeah, it's just sitting there. So I will. Lovely. Yeah, I think we can end it there. So let's share the results.
Perfect. So relevant to the
slide. They're coming up there now. If everyone can see that.
Can everyone see?
I'll just keep. It should be sharing there now. We 7 out of 10. 7 people out of 10 have submitted by email. 2 people out of 10, their last CV would have been through a website or an online form, and then 1 person used a recruiter. So we also had the options of post or handed in person, and nobody had used those 2 formats.
I suppose we all got the message today on this slide. In that case, I wanted to show, I suppose, how unpopular it is, I suppose, old methods of handing out your CV. So again, nobody here or no one that answered has handed in or posted their CV. So what does that tell you? It's all going towards technology. So I suppose even when I was looking for a job, maybe when I was in secondary school, it was print the CV, print 40 copies of your CV, put them in your school bag and walk around every employer and hand them in piece by piece and pray for a call that maybe you might have an interview. So things are really changing now. You can, it used to take a whole day and maybe I got 20 or 30 CVs handed out, my 15-year-old self. I'd say, Patrick, you're similar to yourself, the way you handed out the CVs, but today you have the advantage. Like, you have all of the networking. You have emails, you have phones, you have LinkedIn, you have websites. There's place on place on place to apply. You don't need to do the 8 hours walking like myself and Patrick once did, I suppose, handing in the CVs to everywhere and hoping someone gave you the call back. So use that to your advantage. You're in the age of information, the age of technology. So use that to your advantage. You can already read about me. If you find me on LinkedIn, you can read about what I do before you speak or send a message to me on LinkedIn. Use the information that is free and available. A lot of the people that work at companies will say, will post, I work for this company on LinkedIn. So you can go on LinkedIn to a company, you can view all of the people who work there. Are you in HR? Are you in sales? Again, it's using the information you have available to you to make your job search that bit more efficient. So LinkedIn has transformed the landscape of job applications. Technology has transformed it. How, I suppose, and LinkedIn is involved in that. So in this digital age, technology plays a big role in how our CVs are written. We use it to write them, distribute it. We email our CV off, and evaluate it, and how I view your CV. So let's explore how, I suppose, these three different ways can affect your CV today. So firstly, technology, as a great question was asked, I would recommend use your CV. So technology has revolutionized the way we can present our information. We don't need to write it. We can make 100 copies of it and send it to 100 places, and all without taking a step outside the house. So again, this is what you need to be using to your advantage. So with the rise of online platforms and digital tools, job seekers like yourself have access to lots of templates, designs, formatting options. This will allow you to have visual appealing CV. It will allow you to stand out, allow you to put the information on that, again, outlines your USP. So gone are the days, as I was saying, of printing and mailing out your physical copies. You're essentially, now we just share them by email through attachments, online portals, and this allows for instant and widespread of my CV. So the speed is, I suppose, is the main takeaway here. Speed and volume. You can get your CV to 50, 100 people in a day very quickly, rather than the 8 hours. Think of me and Patrick walking around shopping centers with our backpacks. Don't be that. You can use, all you have to do is fire around some CVs, connect on by email, by portals, by, I suppose, connecting on LinkedIn. So how does it affect how my CV is viewed? So when you apply to a company, where does your CV go? A lot of these companies have expensive HR systems that will track all of the applicants they've ever received. However, a lot of this technology may only be able to pick up words. So it can only, if you wrote software engineer, it will only know you were a software engineer. If you put a picture of a software engineer, it's not going to know that's what you did. So that's the downfall, I suppose, of technology, is that, but use that to your advantage. If we know that's the downfall, share the words that are relevant to yourself. If you can only be qualified on the words you communicate. So again, only you know yourself. Use the best descriptive words to describe your profile. A lot of these applicant tracking systems won't be able to pick up on pictures or, the information that will be nicely put in place. So maybe you have a skills graph. Technology on the company side is not going to pull your skills graph. It's going to mean little to nothing on a CV. So a fancy skills graph looks great. However, technology is not going to pick up on it. And another comment on a skills graph. If I see And this, I mean, when I see somebody and it's a visual of 20 circles and they have 15 of the circles filled in. So my Excel skills are 15 out of 20 is what they're telling me. So to me, that doesn't mean anything. Judged by who? 15 from 20 is it's kind of pulled from the air. So if you're rating your word skills as 13 out of 17, understand a recruiter is going to have a hard time reading that. What does that mean? In what context? So I would say skills graphs, leave them to the side. It doesn't give you any real reflection of what your skills are in that area. So yeah. So again, when I do a search, I put in certain words, certain skills, certain keywords. If you don't have these keywords on your CV is not going to show up in my search. So I suppose it's a double-edged thing in that sense, that you won't, if you don't have the correct words, you won't apply correctly and be pulled into the correct pool on client or company side. And if you don't have the right words on your CV, you won't show up in my search. So I suppose you're losing out on both sides. So you can only be judged on the information that is on your CV. And I can't stress that enough. If it's not there, we don't know it. So next we have, so if we imagine that you are a recruiter and you posted a job online yesterday and you received 100 CVs. I have 1 hour to screen and find 5 suitable candidates. So how are we going to filter them? From what we've talked today, how would you go through your top 5? Anyone can put an answer in the chat. From what I've spoken about today, what would, if you were a recruiter, how are you going to filter those 100 CVs, or how are you going to choose your top 5? Maybe just so. I would filter them from it would be to qualifications and experience. Again, it's going to sound very generic, but that's going to be top of the list. So, however, this can be pushed in different ways. So it will be difficult for me to decide the top 5 because some people are very good at communicating their transferable skills. So maybe, for example, you're dealing with clients. That's a part of your job, dealing with other companies. There'll be probably 100 ways to say that you deal with clients. So it might be consulting with external stakeholders. You could be liaising with internal clients. There's many ways to, I suppose, express what you're doing, which I suppose spills onto my next slide. So I'm going to show you a job spec. Now, take a minute, review this job spec, and tell me what's the correct title for this job spec. Now, I'll give you a few minutes to review it, and I want to see some answers in the chat, please, or in the Q&A on A, B, C, or D. What do you think it is? Patrick, would you be so kind and to
set up a quick poll for this, I think.
Lovely. The hint here is there's no wrong answers. Should be a poll
there now.
Take your time. I know it's a lot of text there, so there's no rush. few answers coming in now. And again, not obliged to answer.
Great. So we'll give it 15 seconds, guys, and I'll close the poll. If anybody else wants to add in their thoughts. Okay, so I'll share the results. So hopefully you can see those now.
Thanks for that, guys.
So of 9 people answered and 4 people said A, customer support administrator. 2 people said B, onboarding specialist. 2 people said C, onboarding administrator. And 1 person said D, inside sales executive.
So Patrick, what's your guess?
I'm going to be cheeky. I think you said at the start there was no wrong answers. So I'm going to say all of the above or all of the 4.
Well, a big bull of buzz for Patrick, because that is the correct answer. And that's what I wanted to show is all of these can be packaged different ways. Don't limit yourself to a job title, being that in your search and being that in your experience. You don't need to limit yourself to titles. The skills are what's important here. And I suppose this is a great example of showing how that works in action, you know. And so a lot of people will limit their searches due to titles. Absolutely do not. Look at what's in there. And a lot of companies can call different titles different things. So, you know, different companies would call a customer support administrator, could be a customer service representative, it could be a contract administrator, and the list goes on. So again, great example. Don't limit yourself on your own CV to titles, and don't limit your search to titles. Thank you, Patrick. So important to remember, very easy points. I would, additionally to the 6 R's, remember these. So keep it simple, neat, easy to read. You wanted to use, I suppose, keywords for simple terms of you're not going to show in my search, or your information won't pull correctly to the company's websites if you don't have those keywords. So we can only judge you on the words that have been provided. We have, so use Word format or PDF. My preference would be for PDF. Either is generally good, but PDF would be my preference. Reason being is because Mac, if you're using a Mac, you can save it as a different format and it won't be able to view it on Windows, and vice versa. If you use a PDF, you can ensure that what you are sending is what the reader will see. So as a PDF, you cannot edit it, and it will display the information like a painting. If you use Word, potentially, I don't like using Word because if I open a CV and there's some images or some text that I do not have formatted to my PC, it won't show correctly. So again, I would always use PDF because you can guarantee what you can see is what the reader will see, and that's what's most important. And check your spelling, grammar, and again, your contact details, very, very, very important. No more than 2 to 3 pages. So this needs to be nice and snappy. And we don't have, I suppose, as I pertain to, you probably get 30 seconds or 60 seconds. You don't want to do, you don't have 8-page CV because it's not going to get read. So very quickly, a cover letter. Don't get too tied up with cover letters. This can just be a very, very brief introduction, but don't spend spend the body of your time on your CV. A cover letter, if you want to attach it, can be a nice warming piece. So essentially, I always like to split a cover letter into 3 paragraphs. So past, present, and future. Very, very simple. So I won't spend too long here. Present. So, or in the past, I suppose, serves as a personalized intro. Why you're applying, why you're enthusiastic about it, and how your qualifications or experience can meet that. Present, when discussing your experience, focus on what's most relevant, like what we've seen with Leonardo da Vinci, your present experience, and I suppose transferring what is relevant to that role. So highlight your achievements, projects, and that directly align with the job you're looking for. And future. So conclude your letter with a strong closing paragraph, maybe a call to action for the reader. So you could say, you could invite the employer to take the next step by requesting an interview. You could even be, I suppose, get one step ahead, and you could provide your availability to take a call if required, and end the letter with I suppose, a professional closing, and again, your contact information. You can't leave this in enough places, especially if the ones on your CV don't work. So yeah, I would say talking through your CV. So you've done all the hard work, you have an amazing CV, but you can't talk about it. So that you need to now master how to talk through your experience, because this will be the natural next step. So someone likes your CV and wants to enter you in a process, and your next natural step will often be speaking through your CV and experience. So that's a vital skill, is mastering the art of talking through your CV, or explaining your CV. So you can do this well by a little bit of prep, a little bit of screening, review your CV after you've wrote it. And I suppose this is where your storytelling skills can kick in. So take the time to review your CV, refresh your memory on all the positions you've worked, and the projects you completed and the skills you've acquired. Often we can forget. Sit down, 2 minutes. What did I do in this role? And what skills did I bring to the table? So provide a very brief overview of your professional journey to date and highlight some of your key achievements or milestones. So a good thing I like to do is connecting your past experiences with today's goals or today's requirements. So essentially all that means is your skills to the job spec. So how what you have done is relevant to what they need. All you need to be able to explain is that you have the skills that they need and that will help them to fill this position. So essentially, that's all you're doing through your storytelling. Talking through your CV is essentially a second explanation of why you're great for the role. So this is just as important as writing the CV. You need to be able to explain or talk about your CV in detail. And then, so where will we, I suppose, I covered this previously, so I don't need to spend too long on it. Chronological order, you're always starting from the start and working through it. You want to avoid jumping from one to another because it can get very confusing. And again, CV, story of one's life. You want it to be a story, a journey almost. So again, chronological order will always be best. Now, we know how to write a CV and we know how to talk through your CV. But where should I go? Where should I put my CV? So I've spoken about recruiters. And I suppose, so what's common knowledge to me? Maybe information that someone else doesn't know. So I'll detail where you can put your CV to diversify your options and best land the opportunity of getting hired. So as we saw, the majority of candidates on this webinar all sent their CV by email last time. So interesting to see the options that we have available to us. Job boards. So Open Doors, Irish Jobs, jobs.ie. LinkedIn is a jobs board. They have a jobs section. Click. So that's only one, I suppose, element. So you can then go on there to company web pages, careers web pages. Often they'll have these jobs also on LinkedIn. There may be jobs that are on the website that aren't on LinkedIn. Double check. So this is a second place to go with the CV. Your professional network. Like I mentioned, start to connect with recruiters in your industry. Industry-specific recruiters, not general, because you're going to have wasted conversations. So professional network, company web pages, job boards. And as I mentioned, networking. Often these opportunities can be a lot closer than you think. Have the conversation. How was your day? Great. How was your work today? Are you hiring? Okay, it may seem a bit, that may seem too upfront, but it can absolutely pay off to ask those questions, especially with friends and family who you may be already very comfortable with. And of course, recruitment agencies. Don't limit yourself to just one. Talk to many. Think like a recruiter. So hopefully now you've learned something today that I suppose then you can take away and action on top of your CV. There's some additional resources should you need, and we have lots of info available on CPL. And of course, I am always available to chat with yourself too. So here's my email address, and I suppose I would love to help, and I'm going in the future if I can help with anything or that I've covered today also, I'd love to chat. So did we have a couple of questions there, Patrick?
Yeah, Mark, one came in from someone. Do you feel skills profile is a beneficial section to add in the CV, or should experience only demonstrate skills?
Okay, so I suppose it can depend. This question can depend on the industry. I'm not sure if they were pertaining to one of the skills graphs I mentioned earlier. If that's what it is, absolutely leave it out. But as I said, it does not give a real reflection of your skills in that area. So I would say leave that out. But a skills profile can be highly beneficial. So for example, if you worked in healthcare, there's lots of jargon or terms where maybe we don't understand, but as a healthcare recruiter will. So include this in the skills profile. So these could be systems you used. They could be tools you used on a project. So I would use all of these things in the skills, or maybe skills or systems used. They can absolutely be relevant to, again, healthcare, where they use a certain system or a certain clinic or they use some certain data, or let's say in software engineering, it could be a different language. So they all have different programming languages. So of course, I want to see, okay, they're going to say programming languages, but be more specific in your skills profile, right? C, right, I write with X programming language, or B. So hopefully that will answer a little bit more. Be very, very specific in skills profile. Don't be general. Good team worker. Everyone is going to have that on their CV. Be a little bit more specific. Hopefully that can help.
Brilliant. Another question, and actually just before I say this question, if there's anybody who doesn't want to type the question in, there is a raise hand function at the bottom of the screen. If you want to click raise hand, I will be able to then open up your videos and sound, so you can ask the question directly if you want instead. So the written question here, Mark, is what would your advice for freshly graduated students with no work experience, or to returners who converted to a new field be?
Okay, brilliant question. And as I mentioned this, I suppose, in one of the early slides. So in your 4 lines about your CV profile, this is essentially where you're going to write this. Is I previously had 10 years in healthcare, but now moving to finance, and freshly graduated with a 2-1 from Trinity College, or whatever that may be. Again, don't leave this information down to guesswork. You want to communicate this, and again, show that the information is flowing. Don't leave this as a guess. Write this: I am a graduate seeking first role in the industry. That is absolutely okay. And that is something very standard I see on CVs. Again, helps me form a good picture. So detail it. That would be my answer, is specify.
That's great. And then what if somebody wants to change career, has diverse experience of education, maybe attended several different courses? Should you add only the relevant ones to the future roles? Okay, so for continuity of another great question. So for continuity of the CV, I would be including your previous career, because again, don't leave it to guesswork. Maybe I would assume you haven't worked if you don't include this. So as I mentioned again on earlier slides, write not relevant to the role, other work experience, or not relevant to the role. So maybe if you've worked 15 years as a barber, but now you want to go into the energy industry, that's absolutely okay. You wrote 15 years working trade, recently graduated in renewable energy, and seeking a career in the energy industry. So again, it's addressing it. You can put it under a different title, and work experience not relevant to the role, or something to the like. Hopefully that answers that. That's great, thank you. Brilliant. And hopefully we can take something away from today. Very much so, Mark. Thanks so much. Let me just give it one more minute just to see if anybody has any more questions you want to type, or if you want to raise your hand. But look, as we're doing that, just to say thank you again So much information, so much great information for CVs, for job seeking, which I'm sure will come in really, really useful for everybody here. Will come in useful, I think, even for myself if I'm looking for a job in the future. So thanks a million for that. We're getting a few messages of thanks as well in the chat. So greatly appreciated. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks everybody for your time as well. Very good session, very intensive session, a lot of information to take in, retain, all really useful. So hopefully you'll have enjoyed that. We will be sending out the video with a link to the session in the future, as well as sort of a summary tip sheet on good practice with CV writing. So we'll have a few resources available after today, and a reminder as well for everybody that we have our last CV skills session coming up next Wednesday. It's going to be it's an in-person event, hybrid event, in person and online. So we're going to be in person at the LinkedIn offices in Dublin, where we're going to have a presentation about LinkedIn and networking, as well as a CV and LinkedIn profile clinic where team members from LinkedIn will be available to review your LinkedIn profile and CV and give you hints and tips on that. So it'll be for everybody who's able to attend on the day. For anybody that isn't able to attend on the day, there's also an opportunity online to sign up for a virtual ticket. So you can view the presentation that'll take place, but you'll also have an opportunity to get a one-to-one session with a staff member from LinkedIn at a time that suits you. So that link will be going out as well later on today, along with that will be going out with the links to these videos when they go up. That's currently live on the Towards Work website to sign up if you want. So just again, thanks to everybody here. Mark, thanks to you as well. And we've come in almost perfectly on time for 4:30. So that's really fantastic. We're delighted with that as well. So listen, thanks everybody. And we will hopefully see you soon again.
Thanks everyone. Thank you, Patrick.
All the best.
Thanks.